Will Megumi be the one to activate the merger? Let's talk about it, but if you're not caught up on the Jujutsu Kaisen manga, spoilers beware. Alright, so this first question today comes to us from Matthew, and y'all can pause to read the whole thing if you'd like, but it's essentially asking, could Megumi be the one to start the merger even after Yuji and friends potentially save him, just because of all of the trauma he's been through? And if so, could that cause a conflict between Yuji and Megumi that mirrors Gojo and Geto, and could that lead to Yuji becoming the next Sukuna? So let's talk about all of these things. All right, so let's dive into this. And this story thread is honestly one of my favorite in the entire manga. It's this butting of heads between Yuji and Megumi based on their philosophies, right? Where Megumi says, you always try to save as many people as possible. Like, that's not always a good idea. Like, that's not always feasible. And what happens if you save somebody that then goes on to hurt people in the future? Like, what then? And Yuji's great response to this is, then why did you save me? The fact that you saved me at the beginning of this story goes against what you're preaching here. And it's clearly because Megumi himself maybe has what he thinks should be right, maybe this kind of utilitarian view on what a sorcerer's job is, because as it's been stated many times, like, we're not heroes, we're jujutsu sorcerers. And yet, his actions seem to kind of defy that mindset. In any case, Megumi is conflicted in this regard, right? Whereas Yuji is steadfast. Save as many people as you can, give them a good death. And this is a recurring thing that they bounce back and forth on as the manga progresses. And notably, what happens in this dynamic is Yuji will pick up Megumi when he needs it, and Megumi will do the same for Yuji. And this leads to one of the most important panels in this discussion where Megumi lifts up Yuji when he's at one of his low points, saying, start by saving me, Itadori. Like, the goal may seem so far out of grasp right now, it may seem impossible, but just start by saving one person. Start by saving me. And not for nothing, Gege devotes an entire half page to this panel, something that was definitely not necessary just for a couple lines of dialogue and just a face shot, right? There was a heavy emphasis on this, which I believe is some foreshadowing given what's going on in the manga right now. They are trying to save Megumi at all costs. And Matthew mentioned this parallel between Geto and Megumi in his comment, and this is also something I've talked about in videos before. I think there is a direct parallel between what happened with Gojo and Geto and what's now happening with Megumi and Yuji. Gojo was not able to save Geto. However, I think Yuji will succeed where his sensei failed, and he will be able to save Megumi, at least insofar as quote-unquote rescuing him from Sukuna. Now, whether that means they defeat Sukuna and that's how they free Megumi, or there's some other mechanism to which Megumi is freed, I feel like they will be successful in that regard. However, what happens from that point is up in the air, because even if we save Megumi, doesn't mean he's ready to be saved, or doesn't mean he's going to climb out of that pit of despair that he's currently in. So all of this has culminated beautifully in this moment right here, where these philosophies are going to be tested. Will Yuji be able to save Megumi, like both Megumi and Yuji's grandfather tasked him with, right? Save people. Start by saving me. And if he can, will that ultimately cause more harm than good? What if somebody you save goes on to hurt others, right? And in this case, via the merger. Now, here's where we can get a little wiggle room on the details, because I ultimately don't think it matters if Sukuna is the one to start the merger or if it's Megumi himself, like if he takes a dark turn after being saved or whatever the case may be, because ultimately, in either case, this is only going to happen because Yuji and the others are trying to save Megumi. If they had just gone in with the plan to eliminate Sukuna at any cost, then they might have been able to defeat him by now. On some level, whether we want to talk about back during the Gojo fight or when Yuta and Yuji were facing off against Sukuna in Yuta's domain, there was some level of the good guys holding back or changing their strategy based upon the fact that they were trying to save Megumi. So if they had just taken out Sukuna and just said, Megumi is an acceptable loss, would that ultimately have been better, since it would have definitely prevented the merger? Now, just to be completely clear before anybody comes at me in the comments, I am not saying that they would have been able to 100% defeat Sukuna if they had just said to hell with Megumi, but it absolutely affected things in a way that we won't be able to quantify. And I think that is kind of the thematic level that Gege is planting here on, is it going to be worth it to try and save everyone given the, consequences of those actions? So to circle back to the original question on could Megumi be the one to activate the merger, I think so. It just kind of depends on which direction Gege wants to go with this, right? Is he going to make Megumi take a dark turn, whether Sukuna is defeated or not? But Megumi himself, with his own agency, will be the one to start the merger for whatever reason. I do think that's possible, but I feel like we would need some more development to explain why Megumi not only has given up on life, but has taken kind of that vengeful stance on wanting to hurt others on the same way out, right? Because that doesn't really add up to me right now. I don't know why Megumi would take such an evil turn. Is it possible? Sure, especially given the parallels between Geto and Gojo, like I said. But even if that happens, I do think Yuji will ultimately get through to him and save him. I do not believe that Yuji is going to go evil. I know that theory has been really popular lately, but I don't think that's the story Gege has been telling. And in fact, I think it's quite the opposite. If you've seen my video on the one to teach Sukuna love is, I believe that will be Yuji. And I think that if anyone, maybe Yuji's kind of power of friendship moment to defeat the bad guy could come in the form of saving Megumi if he does go down that dark route. However, I think it could just be even that Sukuna starts the merger, and these were the consequences of trying to save Megumi, and Yuji still saves Megumi by getting him out of that dark rut. He never has an evil turn, and perhaps, ultimately helps them defeat Sukuna at the end of the day. Now, that got a little yappy at the end, so my apologies. But ultimately, I think this is going to be a story of these two saving each other. Now, that doesn't mean they're both going to survive till the end, but I don't think either of them is just going to take a full-on evil turn. I think this generation is going to kind of learn from and correct the mistakes of the past generation. And again, citing back to Gojo and Geto, where they were unable to kind of reconcile and save each other. Megumi and Yuji will. All right, ended up talking about that one longer than I thought, but I still want to answer some other questions, so let's tackle these from Jojo. And this first one, he wanted me to just comment on this, which says, can curse tools be imbued with domains or barriers? And personally, I don't think so. We know that curse techniques can be imbued into tools via repetitive use, or there are other ways too, probably, but I don't think that same process would translate for something more complicated like a simple domain or a domain expansion, especially because there doesn't seem to be a way to channel those things through a tool in the same way we've seen people channel curse techniques through the tool. Plus, domain expansions are a reflection of, your soul, your innate domain. So I just don't think that's something that could really be imbued into a tool. Now, the next one was make an election in the Discord for official clan heads. And I know that people have unofficially done this, like head of the Gojo clan, etc. But I don't really want to do anything more official than that. I don't want to have any popularity contests or, bestow. I don't want to choose anybody. And I know you said elections, but I think it's best to just keep that unofficial for now. And then next, 3-finger Sukuna versus 15-finger Sukuna. I'm guessing this was just a meme, but 15 fingers, of course. And then next, 15-finger Sukuna versus Shibuya Gojo. Now, this is interesting because are we talking Yuji Sukuna or Megumi Sukuna? But I think what it ultimately boils down to is how refined is 15-finger Sukuna's domain compared to 19 and 20. Is it the same? If so, Gojo's probably going to lose because he doesn't have the prison realm experience in order to manipulate his domain, which he needed to do to equalize the domain clash. So if 15-finger Sukuna is just as skilled in that regard, then he probably has a slight edge over Gojo. But if he doesn't, then I think Shibuya Gojo beats him because his domain is just going to win first of all. But even if not, if it doesn't come down to a battle of domains, then Shibuya Gojo is going to be able to beat Sukuna, in my opinion, just with all the non-domain aspects. Oh, and finally, he wanted me to stream Jujutsu shenanigans. And I won't make any promises, but it would definitely be fun at some point to just do a lobotomy Kaisen stream and check out this and a few other things you guys have wanted me to check out. Next up, speaking of cursed tools, we have this question from Edwin who wants to know if Toto's Vibroslap could become a cursed tool. And I think yes, based on the rules we kind of have seen established, that it would make sense, assuming Toto lives through this battle and goes on to live for a number of years, continuously using his curse technique through the Vibroslap. Then, similar to Nanami's cleaver, I think it would at some point become a cursed tool itself. Alrighty, y'all, that's all for this one, but don't worry, we got more content coming down the pipeline to keep you guys fed. Special shout out to everybody who donated. Thank you so much, and thank you for watching.